Hey everyone, it's Deidre here. Let's be honest, podcasts are the thing right now, but I truly believe they genuinely work in sharing stories. I have the gift of gab, and that's no joke. This podcast allows me a platform to invite the people that I want to talk with and share our stories. I hope as a listener you gained something new or just a little bit of joy. So sit back, relax, and let's get to chatting. Hey everyone, it's Deidre here. So this episode I'm calling Talking to Myself, because that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be talking to myself out loud for all of you to hear, and I'll be giving you guys my opinions over some things that have been happening in pop culture, TV shows I'm watching, things like that. This is just to kind of go in between having guests. I plan on having a lot of guests on the podcast, but people have busy lives, and so I also want this podcast to be a platform for me to just be creative and kind of express myself. So this is just me talking, but I'm going to be going over some things that I think are super important, well, in my life anyways, and then we'll talk about it, or I'll talk about it to myself. And after you listen to this episode, if you have questions for me or you want to have a discussion about what I talk about in this episode, please feel free to reach out to me on social media. So first and foremost, I'm a huge Bachelorette fan. I've grown up watching that show for years, but I'm telling you what, this season sucks. And I feel like on social media, it's like, especially on Twitter, it's like a hit and miss. There's people who either love Hannah and love this season, or they absolutely hate it. And as someone who's been a fan of the show for a while, I am not liking how this is all playing out. I was rooting for her at first, but she's just awkward. And then with every episode, I keep telling myself, like, it's going to get better, it's going to get better. And then it doesn't get any better. It actually gets worse. In this last episode, spoilers ahead, it was just basically about Luke P. And he is not worth airtime. I'm sorry. There have been way better villains, or people they pinned against as villains, I guess, throughout the years, and he's just not worth it. If anything, he's just crazy in his own way. Like, he's got his own issues, and this show is definitely not made for him, and I don't know why Hannah keeps him around. I don't get it, but I'm not a fan of it. But in other news of the Bachelor franchise this week, they announced the full cast, well, the first full cast of Bachelor in Paradise, and there are some big names in there this season, and I can't wait for that, personally, because I love Bachelor in Paradise, and I don't know, there's been a couple of really big people over the last few seasons, really big standouts, like Blake and Demi, just a lot of people that I will be very curious how this unfolds. There's also some people on this season that have been engaged before, aka Derek Peth is his name, and he got engaged to Taylor. And they broke up, goodness gracious, less than a year ago. And now he's back on Paradise again. So I will just be curious how it all plays out. And yeah, that's my take on the Bachelor franchise. I hope Hannah finds love, I guess. But at this point, like, let's just put it this way. This last episode, I had to watch twice. Because the first time that I watched it, I was actually watching it the next morning, on Tuesday morning. I was doing my hair at the time, like blow drying it. And that, like, I wasn't paying any attention. That's how bad it is. All right, second thing, Handmaid's Tale. I don't know how I feel about this third season. I used to love Handmaid's Tale, and I still do. I still love this show. But this third season's really taking me a while to really get invested. Like, last season, I used to wake up early on Wednesdays to watch the latest episode so I could get my fill. But this, I finally just watched, like, the last 2 episodes the other day. Now, granted, I've been busy, but it's just not hooking me in like it used to. So this apparently is the last season of Handmaid's Tale, is what I'm being told. And I will be really curious how they wrap it all up. And on that note, so I would love to know what other people think about Handmaid's Tale, because I'm not here for it right now. In terms of TV, Kevin and I finally finished Chernobyl this last week. If you've been living under a rock, Chernobyl is the highest rated show on IMDb right now, and I don't know if you have HBO. You should really I used to think you need to get HBO for Game of Thrones. Guess what? You need to get HBO for Chernobyl, because I remember seeing the preview for it and I had no idea what it was. And now that I've seen the entire series, it just, to me, is cinematically well done. The writing is superb. I just, all around, it's a fantastic show. I won't say any more than that, because if you don't know what it's about, I want you to do your own research for yourself. But I'm just giving it like 10 stars. It's so good. It's probably my favorite show I want to say of the year so far, but over the last couple of years, it's just, to me, been a really good show. With Game of Thrones ending, that definitely, to me, took the cake of, whoa, next level, which is just, it's interesting. Like, HBO, this network has now created, in the last, ever since its existence, these shows that are just unbelievable. So yeah, that's super interesting. I encourage you to check that out if you haven't. So in terms of podcasting, I just recently got into a podcast called Confronting OJ. Now this is from the sister of Ron Goldman, who was allegedly killed by OJ Simpson, with his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson. And she's just confronting people that were heavily involved in the trial and the case, because it's been 25 years since it's happened. So she did this podcast as kind of a way of therapy and, like I said, confronting those who were very pivotal in the trial of the century. And if you were a fan of the American Crime Story series, or you lived through that, I did not. I was like 3 years old when that happened. But I've enjoyed this podcast because it does give a different perspective of just someone who lived through it in a different way, being the sister and seeing what her dad had to go through, and then obviously losing her brother so tragically and terribly. It's, to me, there's only been 3 episodes so far, but I've really enjoyed how they're broken down into, taking the trial and breaking it down in the case, and they really break it down. And she has a lot of pivotal, like she interviews Marshall Clark, a few of the other really lead investigators. So if you haven't listened to that, I encourage you to check it out. It's called Confronting OJ, and it's pretty good. I've been a fan of it so far. So for all my true crime fans out there, I'd recommend that. And then finally, so I've been trying to, one of my goals of 2019 was to post more on LinkedIn. I still don't fully understand LinkedIn. Well, I mean, I understand it, but it's an interesting social media network, I think anyways. And so I always find the most interesting articles, especially that relate to my industry that I work for with my job, marketing and stuff like that. But I just found this one. I am 23 years old, but I swear sometimes I'm like 50 years old. The way that I talk and some of the things that I think are funny, or I don't know. I'm just really a different millennial, if you can call me that, I guess. But I read this really interesting article that's talking about Gen Z, which is people who were born from 1995, 96 to 2000, I believe. I'll have to double check that. Anyways, so you go through this article and it's from Adweek, so they talk about obviously the top apps that Gen Zers are using, which are not the ones you would typically think. Like, TikTok is a big app, never heard of it. Reddit is a big one. Like, this article is showing that they're actually not on the Facebooks, the Twitters, the Instagrams, like all those big things. But what I enjoyed about this article is there's this slang, which I love. I like to think I'm hip, so I'm gonna read this slang. Probably gonna say it wrong, but here's the Gen Z slang. Stan means an obsessive fan. Spilling the tea is gossiping. COP, like C-O-P is get something. Slaps is cool. And then extra, unnecessarily dramatic. Those are just a few that are mentioned in this article. I read those and I immediately feel old. I have no idea what half of those mean or what you would use those in a sentence for. But I encourage you to check those out. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you can. But find that article on Adweek. It's super interesting. I find it to be really interesting that they can narrow things down to that particular. Anyways, well, so that's what I have for my first talking to myself. These are the things that have been running through my head, obviously, with just pop culture and things like that. I will say in a couple weeks, hopefully I will have a little bit better of an understanding of, well, one, Bachelor almost be over, thank goodness, Bachelorette. Two, the Harry Potter app just got released, so Kevin and I will probably be doing that next week, which will be cool. And then it'll be 4th of July. Summer is almost over. But now that I'm an adult, that doesn't really matter anymore. Like, which is sad when you think about it. Like, oh, I mean, I have nothing to really look forward to in August. Like, I'm not going back to school or anything. So, yeah. But thank you so much for listening to the first episode of Talking to Myself. This podcast was produced and created by Deidre M. Stevens. Follow Deidre on social media. Check out the exclusive Gift of Gab with Deidre Facebook page. And see her day-to-day life on Instagram at Miss Deidre S.